The year is 476 AD. The last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, Romulus Augustulus, is deposed by a barbarian general named Odoacer. In history textbooks, this single event marks the end of antiquity and the beginning of the Dark Ages. Europe fractured, trade routes broke down, great aqueducts stopped functioning, and scientific knowledge suffered a sharp decline that would last for centuries. But let's change the rules of the game. Imagine that the Roman legions had managed to contain the barbarian invasions, economic crises, and political instability. Imagine that the political system had found an unexpected resilience. What would have happened if the Roman Empire had never fallen? What would the world look like today? If you think the answer is simply, we would all be speaking Latin, you are missing the bigger picture. The survival of Rome would have altered not just the geopolitical map, but it would have accelerated humanity's technological development in ways that are hard to even conceive. The Romans were absolute masters of civil engineering. They invented a hydraulic concrete so durable that it survived 2,000 years underwater. They had road networks connecting 3 continents and centralized underfloor heating systems. Yet, there was one technology they already possessed but never fully utilized: the steam engine. In the 1st century AD, a mathematician named Hero of Alexandria invented the Eolipile, a rocket-like steam turbine that spun when heated. At the time, it was considered nothing more than a toy. Why? Because the empire's economy relied entirely on slave labor. Human labor was cheaper than developing fuel-based technology. If the empire had survived, territorial expansion would have eventually stopped, and with it, the influx of new slaves. To maintain production and the economy, the Romans would have been forced to do the only logical thing: automate, given their advanced metallurgy and hydraulics. Hero's Eolipile would have evolved into the engine of an industrial revolution occurring around the year 600 or 700 AD rather than the 1700s. Imagine steam-powered textile mills along the Tiber River, steel-hulled ships sailing the Mediterranean, and steam trains connecting Rome to Constantinople, all while the kingdoms of Northern Europe were still centuries away from basic urbanization. If the Roman Empire had remained unified and economically dominant through early industrialization, the discovery of the Americas would not have happened in 1492 by Spanish or Italian navigators looking for a trade route to India. It would have occurred centuries earlier, led by ironclad Roman reconnaissance vessels. Without the fall of Rome, individual European nation-states would never have emerged. No France, no England, no Spain, no Germany. The very concept of European nationalism would not exist. The entire European continent, North Africa, and the Middle East would remain a single legal, linguistic, and commercial bloc. The Pax Romana would have expanded on a global scale. The Americas and Australia would have been integrated into the imperial system, not as lands to be plundered, but as new provinces to be taxed and urbanized. Amphitheaters, bathhouses, and paved highway networks would stretch from coast to coast across the American continent. The global language today would not be English, but a modernized, evolved form of Latin, utilized by bureaucracy and science in every corner of the globe. Another massive impact would be on culture and science. The collapse of the Western Empire led to the loss of a vast percentage of ancient Greek and Roman scientific texts. If the Library of Alexandria and imperial institutions had remained intact, medical and mathematical progress would have seen no interruption. Concepts like public sanitation, advanced surgery, and anatomical studies, which Romans already practiced on battlefields, would have become the global standard. Modern medicine would have been born a millennium earlier. And what about religion? In the 4th century, the Roman Empire adopted Christianity as its state religion. If the empire had stayed united, the Catholic Church would never have assumed the political temporal power it held during the Middle Ages, because the emperor would have remained the ultimate earthly authority. Furthermore, there would have been no great schism between East and West, nor a Protestant Reformation. The global religious landscape would be highly centralized and strictly tied to an uninterrupted Roman civil code. When we connect all these pieces, we reach a conclusion that sounds almost like science fiction. If we consider that human technological progress lost roughly 1,000 years due to the collapse of the Western Empire and the fragmentation of the feudal system, our technology in the 21st century would be a millennium more advanced. The global energy crisis would have been faced and solved centuries ago. We wouldn't be debating the transition to electric cars or building basic space stations. With 1,000 years of uninterrupted linear scientific growth, the human species would likely have already colonized the solar system. The first cities on Mars would feature architecture inspired by the Pantheon. Nuclear fusion reactors would power permanent orbital space docks. And automated probes would already be exploring neighboring star systems, sending data back to a terrestrial capital that never stopped ruling the world. The fall of Rome was not simply the collapse of a government or the end of a dynasty. It pulled the emergency brake on the timeline of human progress. If that brake had never been pulled, humanity today would be looking at the stars not as a distant dream, but as a territory already conquered.